I really appreciate you being there for us in such a freak emergency, Carl. I have no idea what we would have done without you, James said, looking over to me with a warm smile of gratitude plastered across his face from the driver's seat of his old Ford pickup. Oh, it's no problem. Anything I can do to help, I said, as I looked out of the window to my right at the ever-approaching house enveloped in a sheet of snow. I'd received the call just the night before, picking up the phone to an obviously frazzled and shaken Danny. This was odd in and of itself, considering we haven't actually talked on the phone in months, and usually just text here and there. He told me that he'd received word that his father had fallen down a flight of stairs in his home, breaking multiple bones and suffering a slew of minor injuries. Being out of state, him and his wife wanted to fly out noon the next day at the very latest, but needed to find a house sitter to take care of their dogs while they're out of town. Of course, that's where I came in. I wasn't jumping for joy at the idea of committing to taking care of their pets for an undefined period of time, but I also knew that I had the time, and I don't think that could be said for most people. Having quit my last job a month before to give full-time freelance writing a try, I didn't really have a good excuse to wiggle myself out of this predicament. I agreed to house sit for him, shooting for just a few-day stay, and he planned to pick me up early the next day. The drive to his house was exhausting in and of itself. 2 hours down shitty country roads that were made even shittier by a thick layer of ice. God, I hate winter. When I was a kid, I had a bit of a soft spot for snow, at least around Christmas time. But as an adult, I want to scream until my vocal cords burst just at the sight of a thermometer below 60. Getting out of the car and slamming the door, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't feel my arm due to the incoming frostbite, I had my first good view of the house. It was a modest one-story that really looked like more of a cabin, but having seen inside photos before, I knew it was actually a full-fledged house with all the modern amenities. On top of and surrounding the house was nothing but white. The farmland to the sides and directly across the road were covered in a layer of snow probably a foot or two thick. Thank God someone from the city felt compelled to plow some of these country roads, or I don't know what Danny would have done. He introduced me to his wife, who I greeted with a sympathetic smile under the circumstances, and then let me meet my roommates for the next few days. They had an adorable white toy poodle named Boxer, and a boxer puppy named Toy. Pretty funny, huh? Well anyways, they were running behind and needed to get to the airport ASAP. I walked them out and gave them my best wishes before deciding to throw out a last-minute question. You guys have a great flight. Oh, and you remember to stock the fridge, right? Danny looked up at me with an expression on his face reminiscent of a deer in headlights. But that only lasted a second, and quickly faded to a neutral, almost smile of confidence and normalcy. Oh, you can eat the balloon, Danny said, getting into the car like he didn't just say something patently ridiculous, and slid the key into the ignition. I immediately began to laugh, figuring Danny was just having a bit of a laugh. But when the completely calm expression on his face ceased to waver, I developed the slightest of worries that he may have not been joking around. What? I said. Sorry, Dan, you say I can eat the balloon? The fuck are you talking about? Dan turned his head once again to glare at me with eyes that seemed as though they were getting emptier by the second. Yeah, you can eat the balloon. Just go down the hallway on your right, and when you go through the front door, follow it down the turn, and you'll find it in the last door on the right. Thanks a ton, Carl. We'll be in touch soon, Danny said, shifting the gear into reverse and backing out of the driveway. I stood there, confused, and watched as he backed up, turned around, and drove down the same thin patch of frozen country road we had driven up just minutes before. I watched the car, lost in thought, until it faded into the distance. That was pretty weird. What the hell was he talking about? He's got to be trying to pull one over on me or something. I mean, what other explanation for his bizarre answer was there? Realizing how cold it was in the sub-freezing temperature, I decided I should probably get the fuck inside before my toes rot off. After grabbing a spare blanket from the linen closet and cozying up by the fireplace with the dogs for a few minutes, I decided I should probably go ahead and check out the room that apparently housed my meal. I hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since they drove off, and my curiosity wasn't going to be dying down anytime soon. I walked down the hallway, passing 3 doors on each side, before turning to walk down the remainder of the hallway to a door on my right. It looked similar to all of the other doors down this bent hallway, but I did manage to make out a few unique features. Its hinges were rusted, and the doorknob looked beyond worn down, as though it had been opened millions upon millions of times before. I looked around once again to see if any of the other doors looked as old as this one, but no dice. This one was unique. Without further ado, I grabbed the doorknob and turned it with a nearly ear-screeching creak. Glancing inside, I was met with an almost completely empty room. It was fairly dark, with only stray rays of light shining their way through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. But in the center of the room, perfectly illuminated by the light I had just let in through the hallway, was a generic red balloon, tied from a 4-foot string to a fresh roll of quarters lying on the ground. This was somewhat unnerving in and of itself, to be honest. I don't think I would have liked stumbling upon this in virtually any circumstance, let alone in the bizarre context that shrouded this discovery. But if left at just that, then perhaps my adrenaline wouldn't have kicked in with a punch. Sitting directly in front of the balloon, from maybe half a foot away or so, was a large white note card, folded at about a 75-degree angle at the bottom so it could stand up on the floor. Reading over the black text written neatly and carefully across the card, I felt my pulse begin to quicken. It simply read, "Eat the balloon." This was some joke, I thought, still telling myself that none of this was serious in the slightest. How could it be? Danny must have just set this up to have a bit of a laugh at my expense, that's all. But would he really do something like this right after receiving news that his father was in the hospital? What kind of fucked up guy would have the drive to set up something like this in a circumstance like that? As I stared at the note card sitting in front of the bright red balloon, along with seriously questioning Danny's motives for the first time since this all started, my outlook changed for the worse. I shut the door and sped walked down the hallway towards the living room. I kept telling myself that everything was fine, that this was all probably just a prank, and I just needed to calm down. None of that really helped much, but it was better than the alternative. Walking by the kitchen on my way to the couch, I saw the refrigerator out of the corner of my eye. I stopped and turned my head to stare at its metal door handle. In any other circumstance, I wouldn't have a doubt in my mind that in a person's home, there is most likely going to be food inside of their refrigerator. But telling myself that now, my confidence was iffy at best. I hurriedly walked over and opened the refrigerator door. What I found inside left me utterly baffled. It was completely empty, like I had feared, yet had somehow managed to shock me with a surprise nonetheless. On the center rack, on full display, was yet another folded under and propped up note card. If it contained the last message, I would have probably freaked the fuck out. But this one upped the ante. Instead of instructing me to eat the balloon, the note card instead displayed a poorly drawn top-down map of the house, with central emphasis on the hallway and its doors. It looked like something you'd find written in black ink on a crumpled up fast food napkin. Leading from the front door down the hallway and to the door that housed the balloon was a thick red line. I think I got the message. I slammed the door shut and covered my mouth with my hand. Was I in a fucking dream right now? Armed with the knowledge that you can breathe through a plugged nose in your dream thanks to my interest in lucid dreaming as a teen, I quickly moved to squeeze my nostrils and take as deep a breath as I could manage. Unfortunately, I couldn't breathe. This was indeed reality, and I had to deal with it. I walked over to the pantry and opened it to discover roughly the same thing. Just another map written on a note card directing me to the door down the hall. Except this time, along with the red line leading me there was a thin little blue arrow that pointed to the balloon room as well. Fantastic. If I had any trouble guessing where it wanted me to go, I'm sure that would have cleared everything up. I closed the pantry door and walked back to the couch in the living room. Sitting down, I began bouncing my left leg erratically to ease my nerves, a weird habit I developed as a child and never really grew out of. I was genuinely freaked out, which possibly contributed to the fact that I didn't feel even the slightest bit hungry, despite not even eating breakfast. I decided I'd try to take the rest of the evening to just relax and work on figuring out my food situation in the morning. Danny must have hidden the groceries here somewhere because there's no way he would have left me here without any food for multiple days. But then again, I never knew him as someone to throw a prank like this. Fuck. Whatever. I just need to get some sleep. Too unnerved to travel to the guest room, I decided to curl up on the couch for the night. I pet Boxer on her head as she slept in front of the fireplace, who, remember, was actually a toy poodle, and then proceeded to lay down on the couch. I stared at the fireplace and watched the wood turn to ash. God damn it, Danny, I said, slamming the phone back down on the counter after reaching his voicemail. I pulled out the dining room chair and sat down with a slouch, practically spreading the top half of my body across the table. I propped my head up with my right hand and looked around. God, it looked like a tornado had hit the place. Every cabinet door in the kitchen had been ripped off, its benign contents scattered across the tile floor. Unfortunately, nothing but paper towels and wash rags. I had destroyed the faucet a few days prior with a sledgehammer after having a dream that there was a tube of cookie dough stuffed inside. But as you may have guessed, a dream is all it was. I lifted myself up only to lean back into the chair and look to my right. Scanning the wall, you couldn't go more than 2 feet before reaching another hole. I knew the chances were slim that Danny would stock food in the drywall, but when desperation takes hold, even the slightest sliver of hope, no matter how unlikely, will drive you to do some desperate things. It's been 12 days now since Danny and his wife left, and despite countless calls, texts, and voicemails, I haven't been able to get a hold of them, or really anyone for that matter. It shows that my texts have gone through and it rings when I dial, but never once have I gotten a response from Danny, my brother who still lives in town, or even my ex. I'm at my wit's end. The morning after my first night here, I figured that if push comes to shove, I could always survive on the dog food stocked away in the closet over in the corner. But wouldn't you know, the dog food is wheat-based, and I just so happen to have a gluten allergy. And no, I'm not talking about those bullshit fad diets hipsters are going on to try and seem special. I mean, I'm genuinely allergic. So unless I want to kill myself, I probably shouldn't eat that shit. I'd spent the last almost 2 weeks going back and forth from figuring this must be some horrifically elaborate joke to some sort of demented trap to just being straight up hysterical. And at this point, I don't really know what to believe. I've got water here, thank God, but I haven't eaten in 12 fucking days. God, I didn't even know I could go this long without food. It feels like I'm slowly rotting away, becoming progressively weaker and frailer as the hours pass. Boxer and Toy seem to be doing fine though. In fact, I'd say Toy's doing more than fine. I think he's got enough fat on him to last a lifetime, even if his food ever runs out, which doesn't seem likely anytime soon considering Danny must have stocked up on dog food for the entire year. And all of it is wheat-based. Fuck me. You know, I've been watching Toy a lot lately, and I'm beginning to think he's been watching me too. I had a dream last night that I was standing at the entrance of the balloon room, door still closed, just staring at the worn doorknob. Eventually, it began opening of its own accord, though at a painstakingly slow crawl. When I finally gained full view of what was inside, I was surprised to find no balloon in sight. But it was replaced by something even stranger. Laying on the floor on its back was Toy. but his bottom left leg had been torn off and placed to his side. The dog didn't appear to be in any pain, and just laid there, its head turned slightly to the side to meet my eyes. And then it began to speak. "I know where the food is," Toy said, in a voice I wouldn't have expected to come out of a dog like that. Well, I wouldn't exactly expect to hear any voice from a dog, but you know what I mean. It sounded way too light and high-pitched to fit his personality, but I guess that's not a detail of much importance. "You do?" I asked, instantly distracted by the chance to finally feast. "Where is it?" "You're looking at it," Toy said, with a deviously strange grin that definitely did not fit on a dog. "Go ahead and give it a try. If you like it, there's more where that came from, and if you don't, no harm done." He motioned his head to the right, and my eyes followed. Looking over to the disembodied leg, I was pleased to find that it had now turned into what looked like some kind of turkey leg, straight from a Thanksgiving feast. Walking over and picking it up off the ground, I inspected it further. There was no more dog hair, and it appeared to be cooked all the way through. I decided to dig my teeth into the thing, and my God, was it delightful. It was by far the best tasting food I've ever had in my entire life, and to think it was given to me by some dog. A talking dog. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. I glanced up and looked at the scene before me again, as the reality washed over me that this was indeed a dream. I collapsed to the floor in dread, knowing that sooner or later I would be ripped from my food and dragged back into my living nightmare. But upon waking, my eyes instantly met the eyes of Toy from across the room. We continued to stare into each other's eyes for an extended period of time, before Toy lifted his left leg up and began scratching behind his ear. It was almost like he knew. And he did know, right? What other explanation is there for that? He wanted to show off his leg to me, so I knew the offer's still on the table since we're not in the dream anymore and he can't talk. He locked eyes with me straight out of the dream for that same reason, just trying to get my attention at first. I don't think there are any knives in the house though, which is extremely odd, but I checked. I bet I could just rip the leg off with my own two hands, if I had the right angle on him. I just hope he remembers the dream and doesn't struggle with me. He's the one who told me about this, after all. He better not. He better. The fuck was I talking about? I sat up and ripped the blankets off of my legs. I was officially starting to lose it, and I knew it. I was about 20 minutes away from eating the ripped off leg of my friend's dog. This had to end. I needed to eat something before something like that happened again. I don't know if I can make it out of that delusional mindset again. But what could I eat? What could I fucking eat? I got up, instantly grabbing my stomach and bending over as a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. When the pain subsided, I shuffled over to the kitchen table and tried to call Danny, but to no avail. After admiring the destruction I had caused looking for even the smallest morsel of food around here, I got up and shuffled over to the refrigerator door and opened it because, well, why not? There were only so many activities at my disposal, and this was one of them. Although I had already seen the map countless times in the last 12 days, something clicked with me this time. The map led me straight to the room with a balloon. The very same balloon that Danny said I can eat. And that even has a note card in front of it telling me to eat it. God, that's it, isn't it? I just need to follow what literally everything has told me up until this point and eat the goddamn balloon. Why didn't I figure this out sooner? I can be so stupid sometimes. Oh well, at least I can make all of this right now. After walking down the hall and opening the door, I was yet again face to face with that red balloon. That deliciously plump red balloon. It looked so ripe and juicy, floating above the floor, so ready to be devoured. I walked in and barely even noticed as the door shut itself behind me. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that this whole thing was coming to an end. I was sure of it. That's why I ran into this whole problem to begin with. That's why no other food ever appeared. Why that snowstorm outside has returned almost every night. And why Danny never returned home. I've just got to follow my instructions and take the bite. I reached up on my tiptoes and grabbed it out of the sky. It was glowing a bright, shiny red now, and the string seemed to be over 6 feet tall instead of about 4 from before. I held it in front of me, admiring myself and its reflection. I had grown out a bit of a beard since I came here, and my eyes were beyond bloodshot. But then again, I was staring into a red balloon, so who knows how bad they actually were. After taking a few moments to admire the food, I decided to not waste any more time. I buried it deep into my face and bit down as hard as I could with the last of my remaining strength. "Carl, are you awake, Carl?" I hear through a dreamlike haze. I opened my eyes to find myself in a hospital room. Looking down at myself, I could see I was hooked up to an IV and had been dressed in a generic gown. I looked back up at the man before me. "Who the fuck are you?" I asked, way too shook to pay attention to my language. Thankfully, the man laughed and reached his hand out to introduce himself. "Dr. Waters. I'm really happy to see you awake. It's been a few days now and we didn't know how much longer you'd be under." I let go of his hand and asked what is probably the most generic question of all time in these situations. "What happened?" The doctor raised an eyebrow. "You don't remember anything?" I closed my eyes and thought hard. I remember being stuck in my friend's house. I couldn't get a hold of anybody, and I had just spit into the balloon, I said, but then stopped upon realizing how crazy that last part must sound to anyone who didn't experience it. "But I don't remember how I got here," I whispered, looking over and out of the window to the frigid December night. "Well, let me fill in some gaps for you," Dr. Waters said, and I nodded enthusiastically for him to proceed. "Your friend, Danny, I think was his name, had just returned from a 3-day trip out of town. He told us he had tried to contact you multiple times throughout the trip, but it had always gone to voicemail after about 20 seconds of ringing. When he got home, he walked inside to find his dogs weak, starving, and dehydrated, and you nowhere to be found. He searched the house and couldn't find you anywhere. That is, until taking a glance out of his back window. He noticed a trail of clothes leading from the back door all the way to a crater in the 2-foot-deep snow. He rushed outside and followed the trail of clothes he recognized as the clothes you had been wearing the day he picked you up and took you to the house, to find you lying face up naked in the snow, arms and legs spread eagle like you were trying to make a snow angel. He said your mouth was overflowing with snow. The doctor walked over and pulled out from a drawer what was either an X-ray or a CT scan or something of my abdomen. Once we got a hold of you and heard the story so far, we were amazed you'd managed to survive. We did some basic tests, stabilized anything we could, and did a few scans just to see if there was anything we were missing. And, there was. The doctor then lifted up the X-ray so I could get a good look at it. As you can see here, Carl, your stomach, well, your entire digestive system, if we're going to be thorough about it, was completely empty, except for this little red balloon we found in your stomach, Dr. Waters said, pointing it out to me in the photo with a pen. After I got a good look, I nodded, and he walked back over to put the X-ray back in its place. So, what happened? I asked, fairly stunned by the events that had apparently taken place. Well, we aren't so sure, Dr. Waters said. We took some more blood tests from you just this morning and they should be back soon, so we'll touch base again then. You can leave whenever you'd like if you're feeling up to it, but I'd encourage you to stay another day or so to make sure everything's on the up and up. I nodded again, and the doctor left me alone shortly thereafter. I spent the next couple of hours feeling completely numb. My sense of reality was so skewed at this point, I didn't even know what to believe anymore. Eventually, my self-reflection was cut short when Danny walked into my room. "Hey Carl, how you doing, buddy?" he asked, obviously concerned but happy I was finally awake. "Well, I've been better," I said bluntly, "but I think I'm doing pretty okay now. How are you, and how's your dad?" "I'm doing alright, Carl, and my dad's recovering nicely as well. I'm gonna fly out again next week to see him, but you don't need to worry about watching the dogs. I think I'm gonna try to take him with me this time, even though it'll be a little bit more of a hassle." I closed my eyes and shook my head lightly. "Yeah. God, I'm sorry, Dad." No, you have nothing to be sorry about, Carl. What happened?" I opened my eyes and met his. I'm not entirely sure. I just remember walking into the balloon room and taking a bite out of it, and then I was here. Danny's expression changed from one of worry to one of deep confusion. "The balloon room?" he questioned. "What are you talking about?" "The balloon room, the room farthest down the hall on the right. The one with the rusted hinges and fucked up knob." I saw his eyes light up and the blood drain from his face. "You went into that room, Carl?" "Yeah," I said, feeling very uneasy explaining this to him. "I opened it a couple of times and walked in the last time." He backed away slightly, looking off to the upper left-hand side of his peripheral vision, and then said, "How?" That was most definitely not the question I was expecting. I opened my mouth and uttered, "What do you mean, how?" "That room's been locked since before we moved into the place," Danny said, sitting down on a chair next to my bed and holding his head in his hands. "We asked the realtor about it, and she said the original owner, the one who built the place, had lost the key decades ago, and that we could get someone to pick the lock sometime to gain access to it if we wanted to. Well, we used that unavailable room to our advantage and got the house at a markdown price. But we never did end up picking that lock, and we've never opened that door, Carl. Are you sure that's the room, the one at the very back right of the hallway that looks way older than the others?" I stared at him as he finished his statements, mouth agape. Yes, that was the door," I whispered, feeling as though I was going to puke. "That's not possible, Carl. That's impossible." We continued to look at each other in confusion for a few more moments, before he decided he needed to get some fresh air and stepped outside. As he did so, I turned my head to stare out of the window at the sparkling snow reflecting the bright afternoon sun. I thought about everything I could remember, and then everything I couldn't. I tried to find anything in my memory even slightly reminiscent of what actually happened, but I just couldn't. Either I lost my mind out there, or suffered some kind of delusional episode, or something else. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be. A ringing to my right caught my attention. I looked over to find my cell phone on a little stand beside me. Checking the caller ID, I was surprised to see it was Danny. I answered the phone. "Hello?" I said. Hey, Carl, listen man, something really horrible has come up. My mom just called and said Dad just fell down the stairs and is in really bad shape. Mary and I need to leave tomorrow at noon at the latest, but we don't have anybody to watch the dogs. Is there any way you'd be able to house sit over here for a few days or so? I'm really sorry to ask. I never would under any other circumstances. I'm just in a huge bind here and don't know what the fuck to do. Ah, shit, I thought. I was not too happy at the idea of committing to taking care of their pets for an undefined period of time. But I also knew that I had the time, and I don't think that could be said for most people. Having quit my last job a month before to give full-time freelance writing a try, I didn't really have a great excuse to wiggle myself out of this predicament, so I gave the only answer I could give in good conscience. Yeah, alright, I can do that, man. I really hope your dad's okay, Danny. Please keep me updated, I said, walking over from my recliner rocking chair to the kitchen to grab myself a bottle of iced tea out of the fridge. Thank you so much, man, and I will. Listen, my mom's calling me right now, I gotta go, but I'll call you again in a bit, okay? Take care, Danny said, as he hung up the phone. I sat back down in my rocking chair and took off the sweatshirt jacket I'd been wearing since I got up that day. My house usually runs a bit cold, but it was feeling surprisingly hot today, which is exactly why an iced tea sounded so good. I sat the cell phone to my side and turned on the TV. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's narration. I want to give a huge thanks to last month's $5 and up patrons: TJW, Marcus B, Greg S, Peggy, Gage W, Shanda K, Rachel H, Tim W, Baltic, Jules L, Bet S, Lydia P, Techo M, Grayson H, and all the other $5 and up and $2 patrons on screen as well. All of your support makes these narrations possible, and I appreciate it a ton. If you'd like to join these lovely ghouls, I'd appreciate it if you check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get an exclusive narration that will never, ever be uploaded to my channel. Usually, one a bit too extreme for YouTube. So that's at least one extra video every month for just $1, if not more. For $2 a month, you'll get thanked in the end scroll of every video, and for just $5 a month, I'll shout you out at the end of multiple videos a month personally. You also get exclusive Discord roles for those perks as well. If you'd like to chat with me for a bit, you can join me on a monthly live stream for just $10 a month and get a signed merch sticker for $25 a month. And if you're in the market for some horrifying shirts and hoodies, you can head on over to my Teespring store in the description as well. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @2ndClancy. I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Have a good night, everybody. Cheers.